Yes, everybody, welcome back to Talking Wolves. Welcome back to a bit of a roundup video after last week's transfer deadline. There have obviously been a couple more moves since I last spoke in a video like this, and wanted to give a roundup really of the late action, my opinion, what we know, and maybe, just maybe, a few more players that could still be on the move this month. As always, be sure to hit the like button down below, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and make sure you leave me your rating for the transfer window in the comment section down below. Or if you're listening on Spotify or podcast, be sure to smash us a big rating as well. Before we kick off, just to let you know, you may well have seen that we've mentioned it on videos or on our social medias. We are taking part in the Wolves Content Creators Cup at the Wolves Training Ground on Saturday. If you want to donate towards the fundraiser, we're raising funds and awareness for the Wolves Foundation. I'll make sure I leave a link in the description of the video or podcast. And if you want to pop along, £5 a ticket, make sure you leave a donation and leave in your name and that it's for a ticket. And you can come to the Wolves Training Ground and watch the action on Saturday morning as well. But let's jump straight into it. Here are the transfers completed. As of right now, for the senior team, the confirmed transfers, we've got the ins, of course, Rodrigo Gomez, Jurgen Strand-Larsen, Pedro Lima, Sam Johnston, Bastien Moypiu, Andre, and Carlos Forbs. And the outs, Max Kilman, Pedro Neto, and Daniel Podence, the main permanent outs. And the loans, the loan exits for Chiquinho, Hugo Bueno, Fabio Silva, Kiana Hoover, Tawanda Chirewa, Nathan Fraser, Joe Hodge, and Nigel Lombike. Interesting, obviously a few of those players that I've not really spoken about much in depth on the videos, but we will kick off with Andre, probably one of the, well, it was our biggest purchase really, and interested by this because it's really something that came not necessarily out of the blue, but certainly came unexpected. There were very subtle links between Wolves and Andre earlier on in the window. I think everybody sort of quietly thought that it's not going to happen whilst João Gomes is still around. And Wolves accelerated talks at the end of the window as they thought there was a deal there to be done. So certainly a good deal. If you know, I'm not going to sit here and say that I've watched lots and lots of Andre, but certainly very, very highly rated in South America. A massive part of the current Brazil national team setup, although it's not the Brazil that we've known of from years gone by. They're in somewhat of a transitional period, but Andre is very much the heart of the midfield there. And certainly seems to be rated in South America a little bit higher than someone such as João Gomes. Of course, that has sparked serious debate on how Wolves play and who will play, or if somebody will get dropped for Andre. But I would think all three of the players, Mario, João Gomes, and Andre, all fit in that team together. But currently on international duty alongside João Gomes, Andre, the fee of 22 million plus 3 million euros in add-ons from Fluminense is complete. And we already saw a little bit of him against Nottingham Forest away in the 1-1 draw. Certainly can't wait to see a little bit more from him as well. Carlos Forbs was another deal that got accelerated right at the end of the window. It was reported predominantly by Fabrizio Romano as soon as the Pedro Neto deal was pretty much done and dusted that Carlos Forbs was an option. But Wolves were considering other players. Ajax at the time wanted between 20 to 25 million euros. Wolves did not want to pay that and sort of almost not quite walked away, but sort of put that move on the back burner, but certainly accelerated that towards the end of the window, and they got their man who joined very, very late on deadline day. It was actually announced into the following day, the Saturday morning, but Wolves completed, in my opinion, a very clever deal for Carlos Forbs, an initial loan deal with an option to buy of 13.5 million euros. However, the option will be made an obligation based on a number of appearances, probably between sort of 10 to 15 appearances, I would say. And it's thought that there is around a 2.5 million euro loan fee. So in total, it will come to about 16 million euros all in. Very clever piece of business from Wolves. Not exactly lit the world alight for Ajax. Carlos Forbs predominantly playing as a winger, but can operate as a striker as well if needed, and will, you know, his pace is really what helps him out, to be completely honest. But he was, you know, he was at Manchester City before, and you look at his numbers for the 21s, for argument's sake, at Manchester City. So in the 22-23 season, for Manchester City under-21s in the Premier League too. 24 games, 21 goals, 11 assists. So that equals a goal contribution every 55 minutes, which is unbelievable. That is a fantastic return, to be completely honest, for Carlos Forbs. And still a young lad, still doesn't have to be registered because he is that young lad at the age of 20. But will become homegrown as well eventually. So I think this is genuinely a really interesting piece of business. Could be a clever piece of business by Wolves. And genuinely, I think, in a few years' time, if he cracks on and, goes the way Wolves want, you've got an extremely valuable young player there. But I'm excited to see Carlos Forbs, how he gets on. Currently out on international duty with the Portuguese under-21s, but speaks great English. I have no doubt will settle into this Wolves team brilliantly. And the other major senior signing we saw later on in the window was Sam Johnstone. And once again, this one has sparked a lot of debate and conversation amongst the Wolves community. Signing from Crystal Palace for around £10 million was one of the goalkeeper options that Wolves are looking at, alongside Aaron Ramsdale from Arsenal, who eventually went to Southampton. But there have been other reports since now that Sam Johnstone will be number one. I think that was always going to be the case because he wanted to leave Crystal Palace because he wasn't number one. So he wouldn't have joined another team to just sit on our bench. What I am surprised at as of right now is that Sam Johnstone has come in and Wolves didn't really have a club lined up for Jose Sarr. Now, we don't know at present whether there was something lined up in Saudi Arabia maybe and it fell through. But there have been other reports that are suggesting now that Dan Bentley is still going to be number 2 to Sam Johnstone, and Jose Sarr could drop to number 3, which is... I do feel for Jose Sarr if that's the case. I don't know if anything's happened behind the scenes. We can't judge. We can't talk about that too much because we don't know the situation. But Jose Sarr certainly is far too good to be a number 3, I think. Probably is he's a better goalkeeper than Daniel Bentley. So I would be surprised. But Saudi Arabian window's closed. I'll talk about some other windows in a second that, maybe a late move for Jose Sarr. But as of right now, he's still a Wolves player. I would assume something's going to be lined up for him in early January. But Wolves have said they want that competition. But Sam Johnstone has come to Wolves. And, of course, again, saw him get his debut against Nottingham Forest as well. But we'll get some thoughts now from D, from the Back of the Nest channel, on Sam Johnstone.
What's going on, people? It is D from Back of the Nest, Crystal Palace fan channel, here to give my perspective on Sam Johnstone joining Wolves. First of all, thank you for having me on here. Look, I think it's a sensible business for both parties. I'll start it off with a Palace perspective. You may have questions. Why are you selling Sam Johnstone? Is there something to be worried about? Look, when he did join us, he's been, very good in terms of shot stopping. However, we decided to buy Dean Henderson. And after the Dean Henderson signing, I think the future was kind of obvious that we prefer to have Henderson going as our number 1 over Sam Johnstone. And that's pretty much been the case. Henderson's been out injured, so Johnstone was still playing. But as time went on, we saw it. Henderson was more preferred. And in my opinion, as we've seen with other clubs such as Arsenal, with Ramsdale and Raya, you cannot have 2 number 1s at the football club. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Jose Sarr unless something drastic happens. I think he's still staying at Wolves. So, of course, that's coming from a Palace perspective. I haven't checked that out, but that would be weird. But for me, I don't think you can have 2 number 1s. That was the problem. Especially 2 number 1s playing for the same country. Dean Henderson has been playing for Palace, has been called up to England, and unfortunately, on the other hand, Sam Johnstone hasn't. But I think he's a very good goalie. For £10 million, I think you've got a nice deal there. He's a Premier League proven goalie, a very good shot stopper. However, I have to also add, I think one of the biggest reasons we have lost Sam Johnstone is due to his distribution. The last 4 games that he played for Palace last season, I'll read out some of the figures here, has been problematic for us, especially with the type of football that we've been playing. Against Luton, 46% passing accuracy. Spurs, 43%. Burnley, 45%. Everton, 21% passing accuracy. His distribution is not his strength, and it has been a concern for us, and that is the reason why Henderson has been preferred, because he's much more comfortable with the ball on his feet. I think Sam Johnstone, a lot of Palace fans could argue that he could still remain at the football club and be ahead of Dean Henderson if we're looking at just shot stopping, because he is better in terms of making saves in and around the box than Dean Henderson. However, that distribution is too poor, and that's the reason why we sold him. But I do think you've got a nice, decent player there for £10 million. He's at the peak of his career. I think he's 31 years old, so you can still get many years out of him. He was good for us. There's nothing really bad to say about him as a guy and his personality. I think he's been very professional despite not being selected. In fact, he was still at Palace when we had to give Dean Henderson the #1 kit, which belonged to Sam Johnstone. He made a funny joke about it. So he's a top guy. He's a top guy. There's no bad feelings between Palace and Sam Johnstone, and I think it's a solid signing for you. The only negative that I have to say is that, you know, his distribution isn't the greatest. But let's see what happens. Best of luck to you, all of you, for the remainder of the season, and hopefully Sam Johnstone comes good for you lot.
Like I said, Sam Johnstone to Wolves, but the Jose Sarr not going to Saudi. The Turkish window is probably the next most reputable league after the Saudi Arabian window shut. They're open till September the 18th, so still just under 2 weeks away. But as of right now, no news on Jose Sarr's future at Wolves. One player that has left Wolves, though, to go to Saudi Arabia was Daniel Podence. His move to Al Shabab was made official at the start of this week, moving there for around about £5 million, and Wolves holding around 35% selling clause, if that's the case. So it seems quite a low fee. Podence played very, very well against Burnley in the Cup, as did most of the players, but Burnley, Championship club, never were really at it at Molineux last week. Certainly I feel like a player like his quality is worth having around, but I think he knew from day one, as soon as he returned this pre-season, yes, he'll get his head down, yes, he'll behave himself, but ultimately I think everybody would have been surprised to see Daniel Podence still as a Wolves player come the end of the transfer window. So, you know, he left a message on Instagram, which pretty much thanks everybody, you know, enjoyed his time in the Premier League. And he said it was such a pleasure to be with us for the last 4 years. So, bit of a Marmite character, Daniel Podence. I mean, I'm blocked on Twitter for making a joke about his back heels. I don't, you know, I think he upset a lot of people over time. But certainly a quality young quality footballer. There's still talent there, still a lot of quality there. But, you know, we'll see how he gets on in Saudi Arabia. And hopefully it comes back in our favour in the future with the big sell-on fee. Other players that moved on, Fabio Silva got a loan move. Wolves were desperate to move him on in some capacity. He's moved to the Spanish club Las Palmas. It's thought that the Spanish club are paying most, if not all, of Fabio Silva's wage. So Wolves needed to do this. Get him off the wage bill for a season or so. Hopefully get some minutes under his belt. Hopefully, you know, maintain or increase his value, and then either in January or next summer, that's when we can look to get that permanent sale for Fabio. Because of the loan spell and his frustration at Wolves last year, it really kept his transfer and value quite low. So Fabio really needed to go out on loan because he has got quality. I genuinely think Fabio has got quality. Whenever, you know, I've seen glimpses of him, and I think there's a clever player there, and it's just got to click for him. We saw it in Holland. We saw in the Netherlands. Sorry, we saw it in Belgium. There is something there, and I know there will be a lot of people watching this video saying, "Dave, what are you watching?" But every time I watch him, and just keep an eye on him, just for a few moments, he's a clever player. He just needs to click, and his confidence with Fabio. And I think if he goes to Spain, can get 5 to 10 goals under his belt, Wolves get a little bit more money for him. I think, you know, we'll come back to this in just under 12 months' time and think, you know what, fair play. You know, we made the right decision loaning him out. Chiquinho is also, he's gone to Spain as well. One that sort of surprised us again, another player that played well against Burnley. He's gone to Mallorca, over in the top Spanish division. Differing reports on this one. A lot of the press here over in the UK are adamant that there is no buy option or obligation to buy for the Spanish club for Chiquinho. However, again, today, the club's president has said there is some sort of agreement in place if they wish to trigger a buy option. So there were rumours it was around €10 million. I'm not too sure if that is still the case. But Chiquinho, if he can, again, get consistent game time in the Spanish top division, that is a really, really good level to find himself at as well. In regards to other players that could look to move on or may well move on, there's already been reports and rumours ahead of January for Pablo Sarabia. His contract is up at the end of the season. not really a big part of what Wolves are looking at. There were previous rumours linking him with a potential move to Turkey. That hasn't come to fruition. So I would be intrigued. You know, Pablo Sarabia, I could genuinely see maybe moving on in the next couple of weeks. If not, January, or Wolves obviously just keep him till the end of the season, and he will eventually leave on a free. Other players that I'm surprised to not see move on as of yet in terms of 21s or fringe players. Luke Kundal is a big one, central midfielder. However, maybe the injury of Boubacar Traoré may have impacted that and allowed Luke Kundal to stay. Boubacar was set to go out on loan to the Netherlands as well, to Feyenoord. That was pretty much agreed, and unfortunately he got quite a nasty injury against Burnley in the Cup as well. So Luke Kundal, Dexter Mbekisa, Justin Hubner, you know, all players that in theory are too good for the under-21 setup at Wolves, need game time. Now, in regards to the windows that are still open in Europe right now, Turkey I've already mentioned. As of right now, which is the 5th of September, the Austrian window closes today. There's a little bit of time left in the Belgian window. The Czech window shuts over the weekend. The Greek window is open for another week or so. The Polish window, the Serbian, the Swiss, and the Ukrainian. So, I mean, they're not massive, reputable leagues and nations still available, but certainly areas, if Wolves are desperate for these guys to get game time before January, there are still options there if they want to. And it was said by Liam Keane on our live stream last Friday that is an option that Wolves are potentially looking at. Luke Kundal was lined up for a potential move to Stoke, which didn't come to fruition. Dexter Mbekisa, it was very, very quiet on his future. So really unsure where that lies with these players, or whether they will just be playing under 21s football for between now and January. Chem Campbell also left the club on loan. He went to Reading. Again, that was something that there were whispers about for a short while. Don't really see Chem having a long-term future at Wolves, but again, crucial for him to be getting lots of game time. Certainly a talented young footballer. And again, League One is a good level for him to show that. Tyler Roberts, another under-21s attacker, went out on loan. Had a couple of Football League loan spells. Hasn't quite gone to plan. Was actually out on trial at the Swedish club Norrköping, who Wolves were maybe looking at some sort of affiliation with. He went over there with Justin Hubner, but he has gone out on loan to the National League club, filed on loan until January. And we do look at a couple of different players that Wolves brought in on deadline day as well. The centre-back from Chelsea, Sahid Olagunju, 17 years of age. He's actually in the England under-18 setup right now with Wolves, young Wolves attacker Matthias Mane. But he'll join up with the under-18 squad at Wolves for now. And two players joined from Scotland as well. Ethan Sutherland, who's a promising winger or fullback, who's 18. He'll be joining up with the under-21s. He joined from St Mirren. And the highly rated centre-back Sebastian Lockhead, who's 16, joined from Dundee. Both of these players have had first-team experience with those clubs in Scotland. And Lockhead, for now, will be joining up with the under-18s. Two young, exciting players. But that, I think, is all for deadline day and my little transfer roundup. Of course, if there's any other news, we'll make sure we'll let you know on the Twitters, on the social medias, and on the YouTubes. And yeah, any questions, let me know, guys. As always, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you're watching on YouTube. Leave us a rating if you're listening on your favourite podcast app. And look after yourselves. Maybe see you Saturday at the Wolves Content Creators Cup. I'll make sure I leave a link in the description down below. Look after yourselves. Enjoy the international break. And I'll catch you all very, very soon.